When I read my parents' will and saw they left everything to our cousin, the one they always called their real son, I quietly stopped covering their bills. A few weeks later, MOM texted, "Transfer the money for the mortgage." No greeting, no small talk. I simply replied. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the neat little stack of papers that would change how I saw my family forever. My name's John, I'm 32, and I had just finished reading my parents' will. Every last page, every clause, every signature. And there it was in black ink. Everything, and I mean everything. The house, the land, Dad's classic car collection, Mom's jewelry, all of it had been left to my cousin Daniel. The same cousin my parents always called their real son, whenever they were feeling particularly cruel. I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, I just felt hollow, like something I already suspected had finally been confirmed. Growing up, my parents were masters at letting me know where I stood, or rather, where I didn't stand, in the family hierarchy. Daniel was golden boy, the pride of the family, the one they showed off at every holiday dinner. Daniel just got promoted. Daniel just bought a new house. Daniel's probably going to be a millionaire before 30. Meanwhile, when I graduated college, Mom literally said, "Oh, that's nice, John," before asking me to take out the trash. For years, I kept telling myself they'd come around. I worked hard, paid my own way, and even covered their bills when Dad got laid off. Every month, I quietly transferred money to make sure their mortgage stayed paid, their lights stayed on, and Mom could keep her ridiculous subscription to that wine of the month club she loved so much. It wasn't about gratitude anymore. I'd given up on hearing thank you. It was about making sure they were okay. Because no matter how distant they kept me, they were still my parents. But that will was a knife in the gut. Not just because they left me nothing, but because it felt intentional. As if they wanted me to know, once and for all, that I was just the kid they happened to raise, not the one they actually cared about. I sat there for a long time, rereading the same lines, wondering if maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a trust or a letter or something hidden away from me. But no, the lawyer was clear. The estate was Daniel's. So I did something that surprised even me. I stopped paying. No text, no announcement, no dramatic speech about how I was done. I just stopped. I let the due dates come and go. I let the utilities send their polite little reminders. And then one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. No greeting, no small talk. Just, "Transfer the money for the mortgage." I stared at the screen, a dozen emotions fighting to be heard in my head. Hurt, anger, exhaustion. I thought about all the times I'd bailed them out, all the sacrifices I'd made to keep things running smoothly, and how they'd repaid me by making sure I didn't even get the house I was helping to keep. I started typing, then deleted it, then typed again. My hands were literally shaking, not from fear, but from years of pent-up frustration that had nowhere to go until this moment. I could feel something inside me shifting, a line being drawn. And then, just as I was about to hit send, another message popped up from her. "Daniel said you've been acting cold lately. Is something wrong?" Something in me snapped, not in a loud, shouting way, but in that quiet, dangerous way where you finally decide you're done being the family doormat. I took a deep breath, set my coffee cup down, and smiled to myself as I typed out a reply that would be the first step in a very different chapter of my life. And that's where everything really started to spiral. The next morning, I woke up to a string of missed calls, all from my mom. There were voicemails too, each one sounding increasingly annoyed. The first one was neutral, clipped. "John, call me back. Mortgage is due today." The second was sharper. "Why haven't you transferred it yet? You know how important it is to keep things current. Don't make this difficult." By the third, she was practically hissing into the phone. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this is unacceptable. Call me." I just sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone like it was some kind of alien object. A few months ago, those voicemails would have sent me spiraling, guilt, panic, the whole thing. I would have grabbed my laptop and paid the bill before I even brushed my teeth, just to keep the peace. But now, I just felt numb, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. I didn't call her back. Instead, I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and went to work like nothing happened. But all day, I couldn't shake this low hum of dread in the back of my mind. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted. Not because I was worried about them, but because I knew this was just the beginning. My parents never handled being ignored well. Sure enough, that night, I got a text from my dad. Call your mother. She's upset. That was it. No, how are you? No, is everything okay? Just a command. I didn't reply. The following weekend, I went over to their house because Daniel was in town, and despite everything, I wasn't ready to fully cut them off. Part of me hoped maybe things would feel normal, that maybe we could have a family dinner without me being reminded where I ranked. Big mistake. I walked into the living room, and there was Daniel, lounging on the couch like he owned the place, which, technically, I guess he did now. Mom was perched on the arm of the sofa, smiling like she was hosting royalty. John, she said, her face lighting up just enough to register, but not enough to feel genuine. You're late. Daniel's been telling us about his new promotion. I glanced at the clock. I wasn't late. Dinner wasn't even ready yet. Daniel grinned, clearly loving the attention. Yeah, they finally made me team lead. Big raise, too. Mom beamed at him. We're so proud of you. You worked so hard, sweetie. She'd never once used that tone with me. Dad clapped Daniel on the shoulder. We knew you'd get it. Always knew you'd go far. I sat there, pretending to be happy for him, but each word felt like a splinter under my skin. I wanted to scream, I work hard too. I've been paying for this house while you two sit here bragging about someone else. Dinner was worse. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, someone would cut me off. Daniel, yeah, at my company we. Mom, oh, that's fascinating. John, pass the salad, will you? Or, me, I actually got a big client this week. Dad, Daniel, did you tell him about your bonus? It was like I was invisible, just there to refill drinks and clear plates. At one point, Mom actually handed me her wine glass and said, top me up, would you? You're closer. I bit back the words I wanted to say and just did it. After dinner, we were sitting around the table when Mom suddenly dropped it. By the way, John, the electric bill came in. I went ahead and paid it this time, but you'll need to reimburse me. You know we can't let it get behind. I just stared at her. You paid it. Yes. Her tone was sharp now, like she was scolding a child. And frankly, I don't know what this little phase is about, but it needs to stop. We have responsibilities, John. This is a family home. Daniel smirked into his drink, clearly enjoying the show. Yeah, man. Don't leave them hanging. I turned to look at him, and something in my face must have changed because his smile faltered for half a second before coming back twice as smug. Dad crossed his arms. You've been acting different. Cold. Your mother's worried. I almost laughed. Worried. Not about me, about the bills. I just think, Mom continued, her voice rising, that after everything we've done for you, the least you can do is keep up your end. Your cousin shouldn't have to worry about coming home to a foreclosure notice one day. There it was. The first slip. I leaned back in my chair. So this is about Daniel. Mom blinked. This is about all of us. About family. No, I said quietly. It's about making sure Daniel's inheritance stays in perfect shape, isn't it? The room went dead silent. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, and Dad's jaw tightened. Mom's lips thinned. That's not fair. I stood up slowly. No, what's not fair is asking me to bankroll a house I don't even get to keep. What's not fair is being treated like a stranger in my own family, while I pay for you to sit here and praise someone else. Her face hardened. Sit down, John. Don't make a scene. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I think I'm gonna head out, I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. Daniel chuckled under his breath. Touchy. I didn't respond. I just grabbed my coat and walked out, leaving their stunned silence behind me. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Mom's tone, Dad's crossed arms, Daniel's smirk. It was like they'd been waiting for me to crack, like they got some twisted satisfaction out of pushing me to the edge. The next morning, another text. Mortgage is overdue. Call me. And then another. Do you want this house to go into default? And then, finally, if you can't handle this, maybe Daniel should take over completely. He's always been more responsible anyway. I stared at that last one for a long time. My coffee went cold in my hand. Responsible. Always been more responsible. It was almost funny if it hadn't hurt so much. That's when I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. And I wasn't going to play along quietly this time. But before I could even figure out my next move, something happened that turned everything upside down and made sure there was no going back. A few days passed in this weird, tense quiet. No calls, no texts. Part of me thought maybe they were cooling off. Maybe we could let this whole thing blow over without another fight. I even started to feel a little guilty, wondering if I'd overreacted by storming out. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe they didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then came Sunday. Mom called that morning, and, to my surprise, her voice was chipper, almost sweet. "John, why don't you come over tonight? We're having a little get-together. Daniel's still in town, and it would be nice to just have everyone under one roof again." I hesitated. "Just dinner?" "Of course," she said too quickly. "Just dinner. We'll have your favorite roast chicken." I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I said yes. When I arrived that evening, the house was already buzzing. More cars were parked out front than I expected. Inside, I was greeted by the smell of food and the sound of laughter coming from the dining room. It felt almost normal. "John," Dad said, clapping me on the back when I walked in. "Glad you made it. Grab a drink. We're about to start." I walked into the dining room, and that's when I saw it. There was a cake on the table. A big one, with "Congratulations, Daniel," written across the top in bright blue frosting. I frowned. "What's this?" Mom smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, we just thought we'd celebrate Daniel's promotion properly. Isn't it great news?" I stood there, feeling like I'd just been shoved into an alternate reality. "You invited me over for a party?" She tilted her head, clearly annoyed at my tone. "Well, yes. You should be happy for your cousin. He's accomplished so much." I forced a polite nod and took a seat, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. The whole dinner was one long monologue about Daniel's job, Daniel's apartment, Daniel's new girlfriend. Every time I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, someone would loop it right back. But the real betrayal didn't come until dessert. Dad stood up, holding his glass. "Before we cut the cake, we have a little announcement." I froze. "Announcement?" Mom stood too, her hand on Daniel's shoulder like he was the guest of honor at some royal banquet. "We've been talking, and we've decided it's time to make things official. Daniel has agreed to take over all the financial responsibilities for the house." My stomach dropped. "Effective immediately," Dad added, smiling. "We're transferring all accounts and utilities to his name. He's even offered to set up automatic payments so we never fall behind again." The room erupted in applause. I just sat there, staring at them. My mind was spinning. Effective immediately? They hadn't even told me. Mom glanced at me, her smile tightening. "This way, you don't have to worry about anything anymore." Isn't that a relief? A relief. That's what she called it. As if I hadn't been the one holding this whole thing together for years. But then Daniel spoke up, and it felt like someone lit a match inside me. "Yeah, we figured it was best to have someone responsible handle it. No offense, John, but it's been a little rocky lately." No offense. Like it was a joke. The table chuckled softly, like this was all so reasonable, so civil. I felt my ears ringing. "So that's it. You just hand everything over without even talking to me." Mom's smile faltered. "We didn't want to upset you." "Upset me?" My voice cracked. "You think not telling me was better?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. "Hey, man, don't take it personally. It's just easier this way." "Easier for who?" I shot back. "For everyone," Dad said, his tone firm now, like I was the unreasonable one. "Look, John, you've been distant, and we can't have the house falling behind on payments. This is just practical." I stared at them, speechless. Practical. That's what they called it. Mom reached for my hand across the table, her voice soft. "This doesn't mean we don't appreciate what you've done. But Daniel is in a better position right now. He can handle it." And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Daniel raised his glass. "To family," he said, smirking, "and to keeping this place in good hands." Everyone clinked glasses. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just sat there, feeling this hot wave of shame and anger wash over me. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about being replaced, publicly, deliberately, in front of people who thought this was all perfectly fine. When I didn't toast, Mom's smile dropped completely. "John," she said sharply, "don't be rude. This is a happy occasion." I stood up so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. "Happy for who?" The room went dead silent. "John," Dad warned. I looked around at all of them, my parents, my cousin, these family friends who'd come to watch the show, and I realized something. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't sorry. They actually believed this was the right thing to do. I hope you all enjoy your cake, I said, my voice low. Because I'm done. I turned and walked out before anyone could stop me. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I stood there on the porch, shaking, not from the chill, but from everything boiling under my skin. Humiliation, heartbreak, rage, all of it crashing over me at once. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I got inside, I just stood in my dark living room, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me. This wasn't just a snub. This was deliberate, calculated. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel before. I wanted them to regret it. Not just tonight. Not just tomorrow. I wanted them to feel it. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't the last move I was going to make. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling as shadows from the streetlight outside crawled across my living room walls. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that's so heavy it almost feels like it's pressing down on you. At around 2 in the morning, I got up and made myself a cup of tea, even though I don't really drink tea, and sat at the kitchen table where I'd first read the will. The papers were still there in a neat little stack, like they were mocking me. I pulled them closer, scanning the words again, even though I already knew what they said. Everything to Daniel. Every last thing. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Holidays, birthdays, random backyard barbecues. There was one picture from a few years back, Dad on the grill, Mom holding a glass of wine, Daniel with his arm around my shoulders. We were all smiling. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tight. I remembered that day. I'd paid for all the food for that barbecue. Mom had told me I should, since I was the one without kids or a mortgage. And I'd done it. Happily. It hit me then just how much of myself I had poured into this family. My time, my money, my energy, and how little I'd ever asked for in return. Just a bit of respect. A thank you here and there. A place at the table, literally and figuratively. And instead, I'd been replaced. By morning, I felt like I'd been hollowed out. I went through the motions of my day, went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, but everything felt distant, muted. People asked me if I was okay, and I just smiled and said I was tired. That weekend, I stayed home. I didn't answer calls, didn't reply to texts. I just let the phone buzz and buzz until it went silent. At one point, I heard my parents' voices outside my apartment door, Mom's sharp, Dad's low and stern, but I didn't open it. I sat perfectly still until they left. Later that night, I got a text from a family friend. Hey, are you okay? Heard things got pretty tense the other night. I stared at it, feeling my chest tighten. They were already talking about it. The thought of being the subject of whispered conversations over brunch tables made me feel sick. A couple of days later, I went to the grocery store and saw Daniel in the parking lot. He was laughing with someone on the phone, and I swear I heard him say, "Yeah, he totally lost it. You should have seen his face." He didn't see me. I got back in my car and drove away without buying a thing. That night was the worst. I sat on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands, feeling like I was back in high school, like I was 16 again, being told for the 100th time that Daniel was just more responsible, more mature, more successful. Except this time, it wasn't just words. This time, they'd acted on it. They'd taken my effort, my sacrifices, and written me out of the story completely. I'll admit, there was a moment where I wondered if I should just cave. Call them, apologize, beg to be included again, pay the mortgage like nothing happened, keep the peace. But then I remembered the look on Mom's face at that table. Not guilty, not even conflicted. Proud, smug almost, like she thought she'd finally solved me. And something in me hardened. I started cleaning my apartment. Not just picking up, but really cleaning, throwing out old junk, boxing up things I didn't need. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter, like I was stripping away the last bits of my old life, preparing for. I didn't even know what yet. One night, I sat down with a notepad and started writing. At first, it was just a list of bills I'd covered over the years, just to see how much it added up to. Then I started writing down memories. The Christmas when they spent twice as much on Daniel as on me. The time they forgot to invite me to a family vacation because they assumed I wouldn't want to come. The night Mom told me she wished I'd turn out more like Daniel. By the time I was done, I had several pages filled. I stared at them for a long time. For the first time in days, I felt something other than sadness. It was still pain, yes, but now it had an edge, a direction. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I could feel the first flicker of resolve, the tiniest spark of something that would eventually turn into fire. I tucked the pages into a drawer, turned off the light, and lay in bed. For the first time that week, I slept. Not well, not deeply, but enough. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew I wasn't going to stay at the bottom forever. I was going to climb out. Quietly, carefully. And when I did, I wasn't going back. The morning after I wrote those pages, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no thunderclap, no epiphany, but it was enough. I woke up earlier than usual, sat at the edge of the bed, and just breathed. My chest still felt heavy, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. I started small. I made breakfast, a real one, not just coffee and whatever was in the fridge. I put on clothes that weren't just the same hoodie I'd been living in for days. I opened the curtains and let the sunlight in. It felt strange, but good, like my apartment was mine again instead of a cave where I hid from the world. That week at work, I threw myself into projects like I hadn't in months. Instead of clocking in and zoning out, I stayed late, polished presentations, volunteered to take the lead on something my boss had been struggling to assign. My coworkers noticed. "You seem different," one of them said as we were leaving one night. "Better different?" I asked. She smiled. "Yeah, like you care again." That stuck with me. By the end of the month, I'd closed 2 new clients and gotten a quiet nod of approval from my boss, the kind that usually meant good things at review time. My paycheck reflected the change too. I took some of that money and started looking for a new place. My apartment wasn't bad, but it felt too close to everything, too close to them. I needed space, a fresh start. After a few weeks of searching, I found it. A loft apartment across town, tucked away in an old converted factory building with exposed brick walls and tall windows. The rent was higher, but with my new workload and income, I could afford it. Moving day felt like shedding a skin. I packed up everything in silence, loading box after box into the back of a rental truck, and with every trip down those apartment stairs, I felt lighter. When I turned in my old keys, I didn't look back. The first night in the new place, I didn't even set up a bed. I just lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, smiling like an idiot. The air felt different here. Quiet, yes, but not suffocating. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I joined a gym for the first time in years. At first, I hated it. I felt awkward and out of place, fumbling through routines while everyone else seemed to know exactly what they were doing. But after a few weeks, I started to notice changes. My posture was better. My sleep was deeper. I had more energy during the day. I started cooking more too. Real meals, not just takeout or frozen dinners. There was something weirdly therapeutic about chopping vegetables, searing chicken, and sitting down to a dinner I made for myself. On weekends, I took long walks around the city, finding coffee shops and bookstores I'd never noticed before. I started talking to people again. The barista who remembered my order, the guy at the gym who spotted me on bench press, the neighbor down the hall who always said good morning. Slowly, almost without realizing it, I built a little circle of support. One Friday night, I hosted a game night in my new apartment. Just a few friends from work, some snacks, music in the background. At one point, I caught myself laughing. Like really laughing, the kind that makes your stomach hurt, and realized it was the first time I'd felt light in months. When everyone left, I stood in the doorway for a while, looking around my place. It was warm now, lived in. Mine. But I hadn't forgotten. The pages I'd written that night after the announcement dinner were still in my drawer. Sometimes I'd take them out and read through them, not to dwell on the pain, but to remind myself why I was doing all this, why I was building something for myself. One night, about 3 months after I moved, I got a text from my mom. "Daniel is moving into the house officially this weekend. We'd love for you to come by and help him settle in." I stared at the message for a long time. Help him settle in. I put the phone down and went back to what I was doing, working on a proposal for a client who could single-handedly double my annual commission if they signed. I didn't reply. By summer, things were moving fast. I got that client, and with it came a raise, a big one. Enough that I could max out my savings account and start investing. It wasn't just about money, though. It was about finally feeling in control. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was steering it. I started keeping a journal, jotting down ideas for the future. Things I wanted to do, places I wanted to go. Plans. And tucked between those hopeful notes were sharper ones, reminders of what had happened, of what I wouldn't let happen again. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not quite. But I could feel the day coming closer. Every achievement, every step forward, every new piece of stability I built, it was all leading somewhere. Somewhere they wouldn't see coming. It was late August when the first real opportunity landed in my lap. I was sitting at my desk after hours, wrapping up some client calls, when I got an email from my boss. Subject: Leadership Training Cohort Nominations. She'd recommended me for an advanced program the company offered, a fast-track track for employees they considered future leadership material. It wasn't just fluff, either. This was the kind of program that came with mentorship from senior executives, networking with decision-makers, and even exposure to the legal and financial sides of the business. I said yes before I even finished reading the email. The program kicked off a month later, and from the very first session, I felt like I was standing on higher ground. We covered negotiation, conflict resolution, financial literacy, and the part that caught my attention most, estate planning and inheritance law. Normally, I would have skimmed that last module, but this time, I was laser-focused. The instructor explained how wills worked, how probate could be challenged under certain conditions, and the different ways assets could be shielded or moved if someone contested them. My pen flew across the page as I took notes. That night, I went home and dug those papers out of my drawer again. I read every line, every date, every signature. And for the first time, I wasn't just seeing the betrayal. I was seeing potential cracks. There were things in that will that didn't add up. Timelines that were too close together. Witnesses that raised eyebrows. One clause in particular, about the house being passed free and clear of all encumbrances, practically leapt off the page. Because it wasn't free and clear. I'd been paying that mortgage for years. Quietly. Consistently. Every single month. And I had the bank statements to prove it. I stayed up half the night pulling records. Old emails, payment receipts, copies of text messages where mom had reminded me of due dates. I built a neat little folder, physical and digital, until I had a stack thick enough to make my point in any courtroom. The next weekend, I decided to visit them. Not because I wanted to see them, but because I wanted them to see me. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel's car was parked front and center, like a trophy. The house looked freshly painted. There were new flower beds along the walkway. My money had paid for those once. Mom opened the door, clearly surprised. "John, we weren't expecting you." "I was in the neighborhood," I said casually, stepping inside. Daniel was sprawled on the couch, watching TV. "Well, look who it is," he said with a grin. I ignored him and looked around. The place looked good, I had to admit. Lived in, but cared for. My chest tightened. "We just put in new carpet," Mom said proudly. "Yeah," Daniel added, smirking. "Figured it was time to make this place really mine." I smiled faintly. "Looks nice." For the rest of the visit, I was calm. Pleasant, even. I asked about the renovations, complimented the new furniture, even offered to help replace the back deck if they needed. Mom looked at me like she didn't quite trust the change in tone. "It's good to see you in better spirits," she said carefully. I nodded. "Yeah, things have been going really well lately." That part was true, very true. We chatted a bit longer before I left, but as I walked back to my car, I caught a glimpse of Daniel watching me from the window, his expression somewhere between smug and suspicious. Back at home, I opened my laptop and started formalizing everything. I contacted an estate lawyer, a quiet, competent woman recommended by one of my mentors in the leadership program, and asked her a few questions. When I explained my situation, she actually chuckled. "You've been covering the mortgage for how many years?" 6, I said. She nodded slowly, jotting notes. "Depending on how the will is structured, you may have grounds to claim reimbursement for every payment you've made, potentially with interest. That could be significant." I sat there, letting that sink in. Significant was an understatement. "And," she continued, "if the will wasn't updated properly after you became the primary financial contributor to the property, there's a chance you could challenge the entire distribution." I didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at her. "You don't have to decide right now," she said gently. "But if you'd like, I can start drafting a demand letter. Sometimes that's all it takes to get people to the table." When I left her office, I wasn't just holding my folder anymore. I was holding a weapon. Over the next few weeks, I kept playing the part of the calm, reformed son. I sent Mom polite texts asking how she was. I even dropped by once or twice with little gifts, fresh bread from a bakery near my new place, a bottle of wine I knew she liked. Every time I saw them, I felt steadier. Every time Daniel smirked, every time Dad made a backhanded comment, I just smiled. Inside, though, I was sharpening the blade. The last time I visited before everything started, Mom hugged me at the door. "It's so nice to have you back," she said warmly. I hugged her back, smiling over her shoulder. "I never left," I said quietly. But this time, I meant something very different. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop, clicked on the folder I'd built, and sent everything to my lawyer. Proceed. I closed the computer, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt completely calm. Whatever was coming next, I was ready for it. 2 weeks later, my lawyer sent the letter. It was beautifully written, professional, measured, almost polite, but every line carried weight. It outlined every mortgage payment I'd made, complete with dates and amounts. It cited the clause in the will about the house being free and clear, and explained, in careful legal language, that the property was only in that state because of my financial contributions. The closing paragraph was my favorite. Our client is prepared to file a formal claim for reimbursement with interest and, if necessary, contest the validity of the will on the basis of inequitable treatment of a primary contributor. We would prefer to resolve this matter amicably. Amicably. Such a nice word for you. Have one chance to make this right before we bring the entire legal system down on you. We sent copies to my parents and to the executor of the estate. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I got the first text from Mom. "What is this letter? Call me immediately." I didn't. Then came one from Dad. "This is ridiculous. You wouldn't actually do this to your own family." I let that one sit too. Finally, Daniel texted me. "Wow, really, man? You're going to lawyer up over this? That's pathetic." I smiled at my phone, set it down, and went back to work on a client proposal. A week later, my lawyer called. "They've asked for a meeting," she said. "At the house." I agreed. Walking up that driveway felt different this time. I wasn't coming as the son who'd been written off, the invisible helper. I was coming as someone with leverage. Inside, the air was tense. Mom sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. Dad stood by the fireplace, his jaw tight. Daniel was leaning against the wall, trying to look casual but clearly rattled. My lawyer and I sat across from them at the table. She opened her briefcase and laid out the documents like playing cards, calm and precise. "We're here to discuss settlement," she began. Dad bristled. "This is unnecessary. He's already out of the will." "Which is precisely why we're here," my lawyer said smoothly. "Mr. Miller has made substantial financial contributions to this property. Without him, it would not be the asset it is today." Daniel scoffed. "Oh, come on. He just made some payments." She turned to him, her tone still pleasant but steely. "Some payments totaling over $120,000, Mr. Miller. I have every bank statement right here. Would you like me to read them out loud?" His face went pale. Mom jumped in, her voice pleading now. "We're family. Surely we can work this out without dragging lawyers into it." My lawyer smiled politely. "That's exactly why we're here. To work it out." Then she looked at me. "Would you like to speak?" I took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm not here to fight," I said, my voice calm and even. "I just want what's fair. I carried this house for years. Quietly. Without complaint. And when I stopped, instead of asking me why, you replaced me. Publicly." Mom's face crumpled a little at that, but I kept going. "I'm not asking for the house. I'm not asking for jewelry or heirlooms. All I want is to be repaid for what I put in. That's it." The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Dad sighed, the fight going out of him. "What are you asking for?" My lawyer slid the document across the table. "Here's the itemized total. We're willing to accept repayment in a single lump sum or through liquidation of assets if that's easier." Daniel grabbed the paper and skimmed it, his face growing red. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're bleeding us dry." I looked at him, my expression unreadable. "Funny. That's how I felt all those years I was covering for you." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again. After a long, tense back and forth, most of it handled by my lawyer, they finally agreed. The house would be refinanced under Daniel's name, and a portion of that refinance would go directly to me. When the meeting ended, I stood up, calm and collected. "Thank you," I said simply, gathering my things. As I reached the door, Daniel muttered under his breath, "Hope you're happy." I turned back just enough to look him in the eye. I will be, I said softly. And I meant it. 2 weeks later, the funds hit my account. Seeing that number there, money I'd earned back, money I could now use for my future, gave me a rush of satisfaction I can't even describe. I didn't call them. I didn't gloat. But when I signed the lease for a small office space to start the business I'd been dreaming about, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Because now, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that no one could take away. Fallout came faster than I expected. It started with the phone calls. First mom, then dad, then mom again. I didn't answer. Their voicemails were a strange progression. First pleading, "John, we just want to talk." Then defensive, "You didn't have to go this far." Then almost accusatory, "I hope you're happy now. Your father is stressed out and Daniel is furious." I let them sit unheard. Then came the family ripple effect. A cousin texted me, saying there was drama in the group chat. Apparently, Daniel was furious about having to refinance and was ranting that I had bled him dry. Another relative chimed in to point out that I had, in fact, paid for the house for years, and maybe it was time someone acknowledged that. That message sparked an argument that apparently ended with Daniel storming out of Sunday dinner. I stayed quiet, but the real fallout came a month later. I was sitting in my new office, a small but beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, when mom showed up unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, like the last few weeks had worn her down. "John," she said softly, standing in the doorway. "Can we talk?" I motioned for her to sit. For a moment, she just looked around, taking in the space. The framed client contracts on the wall, the tidy desk, the faint hum of success that seemed to hang in the air. "You've built something here," she said finally. "I have." She swallowed hard. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't reply. Her hands twisted in her lap. "Your father thinks you went too far. Daniel, well, he's angry. But I wanted you to know that I understand. You were right. About all of it." That almost got me. Almost. But then I remembered her standing at that dinner table, her hand on Daniel's shoulder, smiling like I was nothing more than a problem she'd just solved. "I'm glad you understand," I said finally, my voice calm. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes glossy. "I miss you." I leaned back in my chair. "You miss who you thought I was. But that person doesn't exist anymore." Her face crumpled at that, but she nodded. "I suppose that's fair." When she left, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out at the city. A week later, I heard from my lawyer that the refinance had gone through. My reimbursement was officially finalized. And then, almost poetically, I got a text from Daniel. "Hope you're proud of yourself. I had to cash out my bonus to cover this. You ruined my plans this year." I read it twice, then set my phone down. Because the truth was, I was proud of myself. Not just for winning, but for finally stepping out of the shadow they'd kept me in for so long. By Thanksgiving, I had no intention of going to the family dinner. But then, a mutual cousin called and asked if I'd reconsider, said it might be good for everyone to clear the air. I don't know what made me say yes, but I did. When I walked in that evening, the room went quiet. Daniel was there, sitting at the table with his arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mom smiled weakly. Dad gave me a curt nod. I sat down without a word. Dinner was awkward at first, full of stilted small talk and the sound of silverware clinking. Then, halfway through the meal, Daniel put down his fork. "You got what you wanted," he said flatly. I met his eyes. "I got what was mine." He scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "Enough, Daniel," Mom said sharply. "He's not wrong." That silenced him. The rest of the meal was quiet, but not tense, just resigned. Like everyone knew the hierarchy had shifted permanently. When dessert was served, I stood up. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice steady. "But I should be going." As I walked to the door, I felt all their eyes on me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. I opened the door, stepped out into the crisp night air, and smiled to myself. Because this time, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking away on my own terms, and they knew it. And as the door closed behind me, one final thought hit me, clear and sharp, like the strike of a bell. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the one they'd never forget.